Hey there folks, it's Courtney and I'm back with my fourth video. This is going to be about how I embalm a body. A standard case, so someone that has not died suspiciously, someone that's died naturally, and they have no Y incision or cranial incision from a medical examiner. Either they died at home, you can watch my video on natural removals, I can try to tag it somewhere. This is kind of what would happen after that video. So whenever someone dies naturally and you go and you pick them up, you will bring them back to your mortuary or your funeral home, just depending on where you work. And from there, normally if you're going to be embalmed, you want to do it as soon as possible. The reason for that is it's just easier to get drainage before the blood coagulates. Whenever I lived in Texas, we would embalm immediately, but not everyone knows if they want their loved one embalmed or not. You would put them in the cooler, and that's what we call a hold, because we're waiting to see what the family would like to do. The next of kin is who has final say, by the way. From there, if someone is in the cooler, you would wait about 30 minutes to like an hour, depending on, again, where you work and what your call volume is like. You definitely would want to wait about 30 minutes minimum, just so that way, you know, the body has had time to come at least a little closer to room temperature. While the person is outside of the cooler, you can assess any trauma that they have. You can also assess if they have any kind of bed sores. From there, you're going to want to set the features. So you put the head block there, you close the eyes. I've mentioned you want to kind of dry them out. Eye caps are also a thing. Lots of mortuaries use them. Not everyone does. Up here in Colorado, we tend to use eye caps a lot more than I did in Texas because people dry out to a degree. They dehydrate a little bit quicker than they do in Texas, just like due to the climate and it not being as humid up here. From there, you mix your fluids in your tank. So I will go to the tank and I will start putting most of the water in there, about 2 gallons. So, you know, like, does size matter with the bodies and how much fluid you use? The answer is yes. My best practice is letting the body tell you what they need. What I mean by that, basically if the person has edema or if they are like super emaciated and dehydrated, if the person is like, you know, of size, you know, 300 plus pounds or more, you're going to want to use more than one tank. Everybody is different and that still applies whenever you die. Once you have assessed the size, so like adults, you're going to want to do a full tank, which is 3 gallons. I have embalmed someone that was 500 pounds. They were a little bit over that. And I ended up using 3 tanks, so a total of 9 gallons. And like I used a whole box of medicine, 35. It was crazy. So I love Triton Ultra. 28% is the best fluid. All right, everybody's going to get it. Whenever I have my own facility, everybody's getting at least 1 bottle of Trident 28 Ultra. Children and babies, you're going to want to maybe start with like a gallon or 2 and then go from there because you can always add more fluid. You cannot take it away. You don't want to go too hot with your index and or formaldehyde percentage. And if you do, you can kind of tell with the trained eye if you know what to look for. Not everybody's going to realize it. If there's any embalmers at the funeral, they're going to look, grandma, and think, oh wow, who did this, you know? Also, side note, if it was a fetal demise or like a miscarriage that was really early on in gestation, you would embalm by submersion. So you just have a receptacle, you place the decedent in there, a bottle of like 25 or low index, and then you just fill with water until it covers the decedent fully, and you just let them remain there until the fluid has permeated fully within all the tissues. Also, special cases like jaundice bodies, there's a couple techniques you can do. I was taught the old school method initially. That was where you start with a clean tank of warm water. You want to add a lot of active dye. I now would put a bottle of 1 Point or ProFlow, depending on if you like either one. I think they both have their pros and cons, and they both have good chemicals, and they both have chemicals that I don't, want to touch, which I'll make a whole nother video about fluids at some point. We'll see how long it takes me to get there. After you use the 1 Point or the ProFlow, you're going to flush the system. And what that means, go either the carotid and the femoral or like the, just either side. I just alternate between those two whenever I'm doing this. And then I let the solution flow through them, and it's normally going to start like in their chest, hands, and their face, kind of in their cheeks and stuff. Once you see the color, you can just start dumping your index in there. I have learned that they're just going to turn green no matter what. Their body was not able to process certain things, and that also carries into death. If you die and you are severely jaundiced, meaning you have yellow skin, you will react to the formaldehyde, turns you green. Some people, it turns them a gray color, formaldehyde gray, I've heard it referred to. With jaundiced people, instead of gray, they turn green. It's, you know, a pretty deep green, depending on the severity of the jaundice. I have found best practice is to just embalm them, because if they turn green, it just means that they got the fluid and at least they're embalmed. That's what mortuary cosmetics are for. I actually just purchased some mortuary cosmetics. I do perform some casketing, dressing, and cosmetizing as well with my trade embalming service. You know, I figured I might as well have a little kit going, little caboodle thing, if you will. A female tackle box, as I just referred to it as to my fiance. Makeup, the mortuary cosmetics will help you counteract tremendously. Airbrush is also really good that I think I'm going to try to get into at some point. Once you have set the features and you've mixed all your fluid, you're going to break the rigor, and then you're going to start pulling the vessels that you want to embalm. You want to inject arteries and you drain veins. That is how you embalm a body. The reason for that is when you're alive, arteries take blood away from the heart and veins pump it back. So your veins can expand a lot more, and so it's easier to get blood excised out of the body for a wider diameter that the blood can flow through. And that is what 1 point, and that's what ProFlow does. I mentioned that earlier. Those are vascular conditioners, and it helps to break up blood clots. It works. It does. I noticed a difference whenever I started using it, and I stand by 1 point and or ProFlow, whichever one you prefer. I think a vascular conditioner and a water conditioner, if you have really hard water, like Denver water is very hard, you want a water conditioner because it will help with their color and how they retain it. The hard water actually can't affect them. I didn't notice it because in Texas we had really soft water. Up here, all the water is hard, and I've noticed everywhere has water conditioner, and I understand it's all about a location thing. So you're going to want to break the rigor. What I mean by that is you bend the arms. I'm going to do some weird hand motions here. You want to kind of bend and place them into repose, you know, being comfortable in your casket. It really helps with blood flow, and it helps to kind of break up the capillaries and all those tiny little vessels that are within the body. It helps the fluid flow through them easier. All right, so how many arteries does one have to pull whenever they are embalming a decedent? I will normally start with 2 points of entry, like a 2-point case. What that means, I will fill out a case report and maybe insert it at the end here. Might put it as a small little short video, show you guys how I fill out case reports. Basically, I will start my embalmings. I will pull the femoral artery in either the right or left leg. I normally stand to the decedent's right because I'm right-handed, and it's kind of easier for me to set the features and everything if I'm kind of facing them with my right hand as my dominant. So I make a small, about a 1-inch incision on the inner thigh, and I will kind of pull away the fascia. We have these instruments called aneurysm hooks, and they help kind of pull away the fascia. I do all of it by feel. I can find any artery. I had a decedent that their leg wasn't all the way attached, and I had to pull the dorsalis pedis in between your first and second toe, and I embalmed the limb and I let it drain overnight, and then I kind of gave it a cavity pack, and I put some action powder in there, which is a hardening compound, and I sutured it up. And first shot, I can find arteries. It's normally very thick, and I will feel within the tissues around the muscle and all that, and I'll feel for what seems like a thick rubber band, or I like to say a piece of calamari because I just am weird. And so I'll feel for a rubber band, and then I kind of go around it to pull the vessel up. From there, I will normally pull the jugular vein. So I normally do my incisions along this aperture right here, and it goes across the collarbone. I try to do it a little bit lower so that it's easier to cover with wax, and that way it's not pulling too much of the neck. So since I normally use myself as the demonstration here, I will take my left hand and I will kind of pull this skin up that's right here, and I kind of pull it out of the way, and I will make my incision along that bone. And then that way when I suture it, it doesn't really affect too much right here. And I found that other people that do it a little differently, you can kind of see the pull pulling of it, even if you do wax it. It's kind of hard to cover that. Also, if you're able to use a little bit of phenol and like a small amount of drying powder like Arterial or something of that nature, it actually is great to use some fishing line. It makes it almost seem invisible, even if you don't do like a internal stitch or a hidden stitch, whatever it's called. I normally just do a baseball stitch or a lock stitch for my incisions. After you pull the jugular vein, there are these instruments that we have as morticians called angular forceps. They are giant tweezer-like things, angular forceps. They help with getting blood clots out, and it just helps to open up those veins, flowing real nice. I actually find it very satisfying. I have like a great time when someone has really good drainage. It makes me feel like I'm doing a good job. After I have pulled like every artery the person has, because some little tiny emaciated people are like, 12 points where you have to go both carotids, both axillaries, both brachials, both radials or ulnars, and then you also have to do the femorals, and you have to do the dorsalis pedis, your popliteal. You never know. You might have to be pulling all kinds of arteries. Most places I have seen have the anatomyposters.com stuff like plastered in their prep room, just in case you need a little refresher. I still have all my books, but my dog that I adopted peed on them, so I'm a little sad, but it's fine. After you have pulled all of your arteries, you're going to want to do something called aspiration, which I can kind of talk about heart taps. Basically, instead of draining a vein, you use your trocar, which I'll try to insert like a picture of a trocar, an embalmer's trocar. If you go to Google, it will show you. It's kind of similar to liposuction. You want to do the same kind of like pulling motion with it, and you're going to want to fan all of the upper cavity above the diaphragm, and then you're going to want to go and you want to fan underneath the diaphragm. It basically just removes fluid, any excess blood that could cause any unpleasant odors while the family is chilling at the funeral. From there, a similar method for the cavity fluid. So I didn't know about this at all until I went to mortuary school, which is most of my career as a mortician here. So until I went to mortuary school, I had no idea what cavity fluid even was. I knew what embalming fluid was. I'd heard of that. And it's basically a very intense and very concentrated formaldehyde index, what have you. They have these ones that it's almost like a little handheld. I'll try to insert a picture here as well. Other ones that are more old school, it's like a gravity one, and you have to like hold it up above, and there's a hose, and then just use the same trocar as you did to aspirate, and you just do the same fan motion, go up so it seeps down, and all those holes that you made while aspirating, in the fan motion, it's going to allow that cavity fluid to seep down into those holes, and it's really going to give you the best chance against decomposition and odors and the bacteria that's fighting to take over within your decedent. And also it helps to kind of go against purge. I love Petrosil, 21.5%. That stuff is banging. I love it. It will really make their innards hard as a rock. That sounds bad. After the cavity fluid, want to suture up your incisions. I normally do that before the cavity fluid. Kind of forgot to mention that part. But what I mentioned earlier, Arterial and like a little bit of phenol if you have it. Not everyone does, and that's fine. You can also use Dryene 2. I love Dryene 2. Great for autopsy preps as well. I'll make like my next video be about how I prep autopsies. We're a little more involved, but it depends on the case. Kind of prefer the autopsy just so you have access to all the vessels. Like how I mentioned the trauma case I had. It makes the trauma a little bit easier to deal with when it's internal as well. Once you suture everything up, I said earlier I do a baseball stitch or a lock stitch. It really just depends on what kind of trauma the person has. If they have a stoma, maybe they died during surgery and you have to suture up the stomach. What you do after you suture and you do your cavity fluid, that is when you take a little trocar button applicator and you put a trocar button in that hole. Whenever you insert the trocar initially, it's 2 inches. When you're looking at them, it's like you're left, but they're right. 2 inches to the left of their belly button with 2 inches up, and you aim for the earlobe. And that's gonna help you do your heart tap, because those heart taps I mentioned earlier is kind of like infamous way of draining blood. So when you do the heart tap, you go through the diaphragm, you hit the right atrium, and you try not to go all the way through, and that will help you just initiate blood flow. And it's a lot cleaner, it's a lot less messy, but I don't mind either way. It just depends on what's happening with the decedent. So from there, you want to do bath time. So that's my favorite part. After I'm done and they're all pretty and they aren't covered in blood anymore, spray them down with a bleach cleaner as well as like prep soap I've seen people use. It is kind of expensive, so I understand the appeal of wanting to buy just like Dawn dish soap, and I love Dr. Bronner's soap. The Castile soap is really great for getting blood off of stainless steel tables if you don't have the porcelain tables at the place where you work. It works actually great on both. The Scrub Daddies also bang in the prep room. Love it. From there, you're going to want to wash their hair as well, and you want to brush through the hair afterward. You dry them off. You give them a hospital gown and or a bed sheet, at least wrap them up and cover them. You can either put them back in your cooler if they're going to be with you for a while, and if they're not, and if their service is soon, you can kind of put them on a cot off to the side and let them hang out for a little bit. Keep them company while they're hanging out for their service. All right, guys, I can wrap that up for you there. My next video will most likely be about autopsy preps and what that entails. They're kind of interesting. I was like blown away the first time I witnessed an autopsy prep. It was very confronting. So anyway, guys, I'm Courtney. I'm a little creepy and I'm still here hanging out.